Notice that he's shaking his hand almost uncontrollably. This is a byproduct of his racing thoughts going through his head. He's got to control something, so he's controlling his hand. Yeah, right now, Carmy's life is spinning out of control. His eyes are closed, his jaw is clenched, and all he's thinking about are all of the terrible relationships they've had in his life. His girlfriend, his brother passed away, his mom. This is a sign of life crashing in on you. And it feels like everything in your world is spinning out of control. That is a classic example of a panic attack. Carmy is really struggling here, and you can see it in his eyes. He's thinking about all the relationships that he's had and all the failures and how his life in that moment feels like it's out of control. Panic attacks have what I call a cognitive chain analysis. It starts with an activating event. That's the trigger, something that's triggered the panic. And then it leads to a thought or many thoughts, and then it leads to emotion. It could be stress, it could be anger, it could be frustration, it could be lots of different types of emotions. And then it goes to a behavior. You're doing something. And with Carmy, if you remember, he was shaking his hand, he was going outside and he was looking down, his eyes were closed, his jaw was clenched, he was tightening his fist, and he was sweaty. And so all these things that were happening in his mind that produced him feeling a certain way, and then a behavior, and then there's an outcome. And the outcome typically starts a whole nother chain reaction. Perhaps one of the best ways to think of a panic attack is to think about the bell curve of a panic cycle. It always starts with the thoughts, something that you are thinking about, and maybe there you have evidence to think about it, but then you add to it the assumptions, jumping to conclusions, and everything is starting to pile up. And that bell curve is starting to go up. And then it reaches its climax. It hits a peak. And at that moment is when your life feels like it's crashing down, when panic attack feels like it's so real that you're going to, maybe it feels like you're going to have a heart attack. I have had many clients talk about how they thought they were having a panic attack because their chest was tightening. They really felt like they were losing it, and they ran to the ER only to find out that they were having a panic attack. So at the peak of the bell curve of the panic cycle, that's where it gets really intense, and then it comes down. And that's the best thing to think about with a panic attack. There's a time duration. And for many, the time duration is about 10 minutes. Others could go to a half an hour or maybe a little longer, but it always ends. And when you're in the middle, when you're in the peak of panic cycle, try to remember that it will end. You're going to get through this. Perhaps one of the most frustrating things about a panic attack is what I call a rapid chain reaction. It's when you have multiple thoughts that are going around in your mind and they're all tangled like a knot. You're thinking about maybe a failed relationship or a high, intense, stressful situation, maybe a failure, maybe you lost your job, maybe it's going through a divorce. Whatever you're experiencing, you're feeling like a failure and you're a loser and life is spinning out of control. You don't see a future for your life. You're only focused on life is terrible right now. That's that rapid chain reaction.